Hello friends and welcome to another East German military stuff video. Though this time, instead of an actual item per se, I have a book for you, and more accurately a section of this book. Handbuch für Mordschützen. This is the first edition of this book from 1963. If you have seen some of my previous videos, you might have seen glimpses of this book already being shown. You can actually still get this book if you really want. It's available in Germany. I actually found it for as low as 11 euros plus shipping, though many of them don't come with this paper cover. So if you want the paper cover, it will be a bit more pricey. And yeah, the basic book is just like this green. So if some example looks a bit different or than this one, then probably missing the paper cover. But yeah, with this being the first edition of the book, there is some content that would be later omitted from later editions, and of course some content is missing from this that would then later appear. The second edition would actually look like this with the gray cover, and this would come out in 1966, so just 3 years after this one came out. But yeah, in particularly in this one, I thought I would show you this section, which is about Panzererkennung, or tank identification, I would suppose I could translate to. If you are in the front lines, it is very important to be able to recognize enemy vehicles, and of course with tanks you have to be able to know how to fight them. And in this first edition of this handbook, there is this section about the most common, according to DDR, NATO tanks, and what they look like, how you can recognize them, and also some instructions on how to fight them. And yeah, this section would be omitted from the next edition of the book. Maybe this then went on to be like a separate document or something, because tank models changed quite a lot during the Cold War, so maybe they thought it was not necessary to have it in this basic handbook. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at this, because we often see like Western descriptions of Soviet and Warsaw Pact tanks, but I think it's a bit more rare to see the Warsaw Pact perspective of NATO tanks and what they got right and a few things that actually are incorrect here. I know something about tanks, but I'm not a tank expert per se, so if I make some minor mistakes or whatever, please excuse me. So this section basically starts by listing the types of tanks that it considers most common in NATO states. So we have the M41 Walker Bulldog, the French AMX-13 light tank, then the Patton tanks, so we have M47, M48 and M48A2, then the British Centurion Mark III, and then the interesting two here, the heavy tanks. So we have the British Conqueror and the American M103. And there are also there's also M60, which was a brand new tank when this came out in 1963, so they managed to get that into the book. And there's a couple of more special tanks. So we have the M50 Ontos and the French EBR 75 armored car, I guess, or reconnaissance vehicle. Then it goes on that the M41 and AMX-13 are reconnaissance vehicles. The M50 Ontos and the EBR 50 are Jagdpanzer, so that will be tank destroyers. And then the other tanks are listed as Kampfpanzer, so it will be fighting tanks or medium tanks, though of course the Conqueror and M103 are, in English parlance, they are heavy tanks. And then this section here is about how to recognize tanks, like from their shape of their turrets and hulls, and from their armament, so the cannon and the mantlet. And then it starts to describe the tanks, and there are illustrations of each of them, but the text and illustrations are not side by side, so gonna be some jumping between the pages, I think. This describes the M41 Walker Bulldog, that it has such and such turret, what kind of mantlet it has. It has 5 road wheels, and it says that thickness of the armor is from 20 to 40 millimeters, which I think is pretty much right. And then it describes like where the tank is most vulnerable. So I think it says that it's vulnerable here, like on the turret, where the turret joins the hull, and also between the or this space above the road wheels, which is, well, quite common weak spot in tanks, though it's quite amusing that it describes the weak spots when the whole tank is quite vulnerable. And yeah, it says that the tank has a 76.2mm gun and 2 machine guns. And the illustration for the Walker Bulldog looks like that, so yeah, it looks pretty accurate, though it's missing the roof machine gun there. And the hatch is open, so it's amusing. Kind of looks like this is some sort of prototype vehicle. It looks very clean, and yeah, but it could just be the illustration. So next up we have the French AMX-13 light tank. It says that the turret is big and has a large mantlet, and it says that on the turret there can be a missile launcher, so that will be the SS-11 missile. And it says that the cannon is very long, and the drive wheel on the suspension is on the front. It's very big. It has 5 road wheels and 2 return rollers, and the armor is between 20 and 40 millimeters. It says that the tank is vulnerable on all sides, and the gun is 75 millimeters and with 1 machine gun. And the illustration is here on the next page, so it's depicted with the missile launcher here and the turret pointing up. Next we have the pattern tanks, so M47, M48 and M48A2. It says very steeply angled turret, and that the hull front is angled. I think it says that there is a anti-aircraft machine gun on the turret, and it says that there are 6 drive wheels, and it says that the M48 has 5 and the other models have 3 return rollers. It says that M48A2 is easy to recognize from the muzzle brake, which of course is true since it has this very distinctive muzzle brake that directs the muzzle energy to the sides. And it says that the M48A2 has a commander's cupola, which of course is very distinguishable on the top of the tank. And it says that the thickness of the armor on the M47 and the M48 is between 50 and 150 millimeters, though I think this is from if you measured it directly, and if it was line of sight armor then it would be a bit thicker, so they didn't really take note of that. It says that the most vulnerable spots are in the hull between the road wheels and the return wheels. They have highlighted those spots with the arrows, yes. So yeah, that's where it is most vulnerable according to the manual here. It says again like where the turret and hull and the turret ring basically is also another vulnerable spot. And it claims that the armor on the M48A2 is thicker, but it doesn't really specify how much. It says that the vulnerable spots are still the same. Like, I actually don't remember is the M48A2 better armored or not. And yeah, then it says that all the 3 tanks have the same 90mm cannon, and then that the M47 has 3 machine guns, and that M48 and M48-2 have 2 machine guns. It's quite weird that it doesn't mention that one of the machine guns on the M48 is the bow gunner's machine gun on the hull. I mean, you would think that would be quite important to mention, since that's quite a distinctive feature, which you don't have on the other tanks. Here we have the M48, which the illustration looks pretty accurate in my opinion. This bit here looks a bit weird, like where the hatch is supposed to be. And then yeah, we have the M48A2, so as we already saw, so yeah, there's the cupola with the machine gun maybe a bit overextended, and yeah, it's showing that basically a turret ring is like a weak spot here. It's highlighted with the arrows. Yeah, I think the illustrator has made a bit of an error here, because it looks like he thought there's like this, like the driver's position would be here, like there's this weird hole in the hull. And of course in the M48 the driver is here in the middle of the hull, so there should be like periscopes here. And yeah, I think that's like the driver's hatch that's actually open to the side, but the illustrator has thought that the driver actually sits here on the right side, but of course that's not how it is. And then we get to the British Centurion Mark III. So of course it describes the turret, which is very distinctive on a Centurion. It says that the Centurion has the smoke launchers on both sides of the turret. The gun has a very long barrel with a strengthening band, I guess that would translate to, and it has a fume extractor. And describes the hull shape. It says that the suspension is covered with Panzerschürze, or the armored plates, but I think on the illustration it's actually, yeah, it's not showing the armored plates on the suspension. So yeah, of course the Centurions often had the armored plates covering the suspension, but yeah, on this illustration here it's absent, even though the text just describes it. And it says that the thickness of the armor is between 50 and 150 millimeters, which is pretty accurate. I think the thickest that it got was 152 millimeters, so yeah, pretty accurate. And yeah, then describes the vulnerable spots. So yeah, basically the same bit in the suspension, though of course if it's covered with the armored skirts then it's a bit more tricky. It describes the gun as being 83.4 millimeters, which is, yeah, correct, so that's the 20-pounder cannon. And that there are two machine guns, which one is the coaxial machine gun, and I guess and the other one is the roof machine gun, which is absent from the illustration. And the illustration is showing that this spot is again a weak spot, like below the mantlet, so yeah, recurring theme here. And then we get to the couple of interesting heavy tanks. So first we have the Conqueror, and of course it describes the very distinctive turret shape, which has a commander's cupola, very large mantlet, and again there are smoke launchers on both sides of the turret. Barrel of the gun is very long, and that there is a fume extractor in the middle of the barrel. So yeah, you can see here the illustration, it's here. And it says that the suspension has 8 small double return rollers, and also it is covered again with the armored skirts. And it claims that the armor is between 60 and 152 millimeters thick, which of course I guess is partially true, but on a turret it's actually more like 300 millimeters line of sight strength, so yeah, it's basically almost invulnerable from the turret front, which would have been, I think, good to mention. And it claims again that the most vulnerable spots are again the turret ring under the gun and suspension, and of course the rear of the tank. And it says that the gun is 120 millimeters and that there are 2 machine guns. And yeah, I think the illustration is actually pretty good. I mean, it's missing the top machine gun, but otherwise looks somewhat accurate. Maybe the turret is a kind of bit weird shape, like it doesn't really show the turret shape that much. And yeah, then we get to the M103. So of course, starting with the turret description, that it has very big mantlet. The gun has a very long barrel with muzzle brake and a fume extractor just behind the muzzle brake. And I think this illustration here is actually like the T-43 prototype tank. I think this muzzle brake was changed in the production vehicles, and it has this metal frame here on the right side of the turret, which I think was absent from the production vehicles, at least when I looked up some pictures. So interesting that they use like a prototype picture here. And where the hell did they get it from? And then it has a description of the suspension again. So there are 7 road wheels and 6 return rollers. Which, yeah, you can see the road wheels, but return rollers are a bit difficult to see there. Again, showing that the weak spot is here between the wheels. describes the weak spots, so yeah, they're in the hull and below the mantlet and of course the rear again. And yeah, these weak spots are kind of from the perspective of, I suppose at the time, if you had an RPG-2 rocket launcher, or if you had the RKG-3 anti-armor hand grenade. That's why these particular spots are highlighted, I believe. It's pretty difficult to hit this turret ring with the RPG-2, but I guess you could try to throw the hand grenade there, but good luck with that. And yeah, it says that the armor is between 80 and 150 millimeters thick. Of course, again, like, especially the turret is much thicker directly from line of sight. And yeah, the cannon is 120 millimeters. And there's a bit of a mistake here because it claims there are 2 machine guns, but of course there are 3 machine guns on the M103. So you have 2 machine guns on the mantlet and 1 machine gun on top. That's the M2 Browning, which is missing from the illustration here. Then we get to the brand spanking new tank of the time, so M60. It says it has a commander's cupola with a machine gun, describes the mantlet again, and that the gun has a long barrel which has a muzzle brake, which does not have a muzzle brake, but it has in the last 1/3 of the barrel it has a fume extractor. The suspension has 6 road wheels and 3 return rollers, and again it's most vulnerable in the same spots between the suspension wheels or above the wheels in the hull and the rear of the tank. Yeah. And it correctly describes that the cannon is 105 millimeters, and there are 2 machine guns, which is correct. And we have the illustration here on the next page. So yeah, we have the early model M60 here with the round turret, and of course with the M60A1 it changed to like the more improved shape. And yeah, this older turret is much more like the M48 turret. And then we get to the smaller vehicles. So first we have the M50 Ontos, which I found amusing that that's here because it wasn't produced in very large quantity, and I think it was quite a rare vehicle. So, but for some reason they decided to put it here. So yeah, it says that M50 is very short tank and that it has 6 recoilless guns of 105 millimeter caliber, and it claims there are 5 machine guns, which is, well, incorrect, since there were 6 spotting rifles, so 1 for each recoilless rifle, and then there was this 1 actual machine gun on the top. So yeah, that's quite incorrect. Probably that would confuse any reader, that is there really 5 machine guns on such a tiny tank. It says that the front drive wheel is very high up and big, and it says that the armor on the tank is very thin and it is vulnerable from all sides. And then as the last tank we have the French EBR-75, which is illustrated here. It says that the EBR-75 has the same turret as the AMX-13, which is correct. It says that the EBR has no tracks, which is of course true, it has wheels. And yeah, it says that the tank has 75mm cannon and that the armor is vulnerable from all sides. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's also some text about how to fight tanks, so yeah, kind of the same themes. So we have a soldier here with the anti-tank hand grenade. They are advising you to throw it on the rear deck of the tank or on the tracks or on the turret ring area. And it looks like this is like a M48 that's illustrated here. So yeah, I found that quite interesting that they had such unique vehicles here, like the M50 Ontos and heavy tanks here. And yeah, it was quite a interesting time in tank history, because this was just like 5 years before many Western countries adopted the next generation of main battle tanks. So in a few years the West Germans had the Leopard 1 tank, the French had the AMX-13, and the United Kingdom had the Chieftain tank. So this definitely needed some updating in just a few years. But at least they got the American M60 tank already in this 1963 edition of the book. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.